Another important issue in Indian society since the very beginning that we found domestic violence, and this domestic violence as it is defined under Section 3 of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. It defines such domestic violence under the head of physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal and emotional abuse, and also economic abuse, and that we have in our terminology described as physical violence, verbal and emotional violence, also sexual violence and economic violence. So, under physical abuse or physical violence, we found such actions of beating, slapping, hitting, biting, kicking, punching, shoving, causing bodily pain or injury to women are considered as physical abuse or physical violence. Also, as regarding verbal and emotional violence, we found insults, name calling, accusation on one's character or conduct, insult for not having a male child, insults for not bringing dowry, etc., preventing one woman for a child in your custody from attending school, college, or any other educational institution, and preventing a woman from taking up a job, forcing to leave one's job, preventing the woman or a child in her custody from leaving the house, also preventing a woman from meeting any person in the normal course of events, also forcing a woman to get married when she does not want to marry, even preventing a woman from marrying a person not of her own choice, and preventing one woman from a particular person of their own choice, and threat to commit suicide or any other verbal or emotional abuse. And now we'll discuss about sexual violence. So, in relation to sexual violence, it would be forced sexual intercourse and forces one woman to look at pornography or any other obscene pictures or material or any act of sexual abuse, humiliation, or degradation of a woman, or which is otherwise violative of one woman's dignity or any other unwelcome conduct of sexual nature. So also child sexual abuse, they fall under sexual abuse or sexual violence. And now we'll go to the last one, that is economic abuse or economic violence. And as it is being categorized that not providing a woman money for maintaining herself or her children, also not providing food, clothes, medicines, etc. for the woman and for her children, also stopping the woman from carrying on her employment or disturbing a woman in carrying on her employment, also not allowing a woman to take up an employment or taking away her income from her salary, wages, etc. Even not allowing a woman to use her salary, wages, etc. Also forcing a woman out of the house she lives in. Also stopping a woman from accessing or using any part of the house and its use. Even not allowing a woman for using of clothes, articles, or things of general household use. And finally, not paying rent if anything is rented, if she is in a rented accommodation. So all this falls under economic violence or economic abuse as it is being defined under section 3 of the domestic violence as under the protection of women of from Domestic Violence Act 2005. So now we'll discuss the very importance of domestic violence. So domestic violence remains a pervasive issue affecting millions worldwide and in particular in India. The landmark legal cases have significantly shaped the judicial handling of such offences, providing critical insights into the legal mechanisms and their impact. This lecture delves into the top 10 domestic violence cases in India, offering a comprehensive analysis of each to understand their influence on the country's legal landscape. Globally, domestic violence is not just a personal issue but a major societal challenge that infringes on human rights and requires stringent legal actions for its mitigation. Understanding these cases is paramount for legal professionals, students, and anyone interested in the enforcement and evolution of domestic violence laws. By examining these important landmark judgments, we gain insights into the complexities of legal proceedings in domestic violence cases and how they help sculpt the legal framework and protective measures for victims. So, domestic violence refers to a pattern of behavior in a relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Abuse can be either physical or emotional or sexual or psychological or economical. This form of violence does not discriminate and can affect anyone regardless of age, gender, economic status, and of location. And we discuss the very legal framework in India for the very protection of women from domestic violence. So, the very first legal framework that we want to discuss, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, also Section 498 of A of the Indian Penal Code, the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961. So, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, a comprehensive legislation aimed at protecting women from all forms of domestic abuse and domestic violence. And Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code criminalizes cruelty by a husband or his relatives towards a married woman, which could drive the women to suicide or cause grave injury or danger to her life, limb, or health. And as regarding the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, which prohibits the giving or receiving of a dowry at or before or any time after the marriage from the bride or her family. So now we'll go to discuss each one most important landmark judgments relating to domestic violence in India. So the first important leading case is Lalita Topo versus State of Jharkhand in 2018. Supreme Court recognized the rights of women in live-in relationship by extending the protections offered under the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. Lalita Topo argued for maintenance under the Act despite not being legally married. So the judgment prudent the legal recognition of relationship in the context of domestic violence, making the act applicable to those in live-in relationship and thereby offering them similar protections as married couples. So, another important leading case is in the Raj, Malik and others versus Sunita Malik in 1986. In this case was one of the early instances where the courts recognized the cruelties associated with dowry demands. So the court upheld that demanding dowry could constitute cruelty and thus could be penalized under existing laws. It reinforced the judiciary's commitment to addressing marital cruelty related to dowry, setting precedents for how such cases should be handled legally. And now we'll go to another important judgment of Supreme Court in 2016 in the leading case, Hiralal P. Harshura and others versus Kusum Narottam Das Harsura and others, where the Supreme Court struck down the phrase adult male from the definition of respondents in the Protection from Domestic Violence Act, thereby allowing women to be respondents in cases of domestic violence. This amendment acknowledges that women could also perpetuate domestic violence, thereby ensuring that all individuals, regardless of gender, are accountable under the law. So, this is one of the most important judgment of the Supreme Court in this important leading case. Hiralal P. Harsura and others versus Kusum Narottam Das Harsura and others in 2016. And now we'll go to another important judgment of Supreme Court in 2011, and that is Sandhya Wankhede versus Manoj Bhimrao Wankhede, where Supreme Court clarified that the complaints under the Domestic Violence Act could be registered against not only the husband but also his relatives. This included female relatives who were previously often excluded from such complaints. This interpretation helped broaden the scope of the Act to include all possible perpetrators within a family setting, enhancing protection for victims of domestic violence. And now we'll discuss another important ruling of Supreme Court in 2012 relating to domestic violence, that is B.D. Bhanu versus Sabita Bhanu. So, the Supreme Court ruled that the provisions of the Domestic Violence Act are applicable retrospectively if the acts of abuse were committed even before the enactment of the Domestic Violence Act. This ruling was significant as it allowed victims who suffered abuse even before the Act came into effect in 2005 to seek redress and protection under it, ensuring broader justice. So now we'll go to another important ruling, and that is relating to the leading case Rajesh Sharma and others versus State of Uttar Pradesh, and another in 2017 the court issued guidelines to prevent the misuse of Section 498A of Indian Penal Code, suggesting measures like family welfare committees to scrutinize complaints before making arrest. So these guidelines were aimed at protecting the misuse of legal provisions meant to protect women from marital abuse, balancing the potential for misuse against the need for protection. And now another important ruling of Supreme Court is in the leading case B.B. Parwan Khatun versus State of Bihar in 2017. The Supreme Court emphasized the necessity for clear evidence when charging someone under the dowry death sections, specifically pointing out the need to prove a common intention to harm the victim. This led to a more cautious approach in handling accusations of dowry death, requiring solid evidence before proceeding with convictions. So, another important ruling of Supreme Court in 2019 in the leading case, Kamlesh Devi versus Jayapal and others. So, yeah, Supreme Court discussed the extent to which the Domestic Violence Act can be invoked in disputes regarding the shared household, particularly against non spousal family members. The decision clarified legal definitions and the circumstances under which the shared household concept can be applied, providing clearer guidelines for such cases. So now we'll go to another important ruling in the same year in 2019 in the leading case Ajay Kumar versus Lata alias Sravati. So in that important leading case the court consider whether a brother-in-law could be held liable to pay maintenance under the Domestic Violence Act. It was determined that he could be, provided he was part of a joint family and thus shared household responsibility. So this case expanded the interpretation of maintenance within the family context under the Domestic Violence Act, emphasizing the collective responsibility of the family towards its members. So, another important leading case and the ruling of Supreme Court in 2014, and that is Ernest Kumar versus State of Bihar, and another where the Supreme Court criticized the routine arrest of individuals under Section 498A of Indian Penal Code without proper justification and issued guidelines to prevent such practices. This landmark ruling sought to ensure that the power given by Section 498A is used judiciously and not as a tool of harassment, thereby protecting civil liberties while still upholding the law's intent to protect women from cruelty. Each of these cases not only reflects the complexities involved in adjudicating of cases of domestic violence, but also illustrate the evolving nature of legal interpretation in this crucial area of human rights and personal safety. So, now we'll discuss the very impacts that we found of these landmark judgments. So, these landmark judgments have not only refined the legal understanding of domestic violence, but also influenced the cultural perceptions and enforcement practices across India. They serve as precedents that shape future legal doctrines and encourage more informed, sensitive handling of domestic violence allegations. So, now we want to conclude the very lecture on domestic violence as per the very provisions of Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 in relation to which also we have discussed the provision of section 498A of the Indian Penal Code and also the provisions of the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961. So to conclude, the landmark domestic violence cases in India illustrate the judiciary's evolving response to a pervasive social issue. These cases have significantly contributed to the legal framework, expanding definitions and refining protections under the law. They underscore the complexities of domestic violence and the necessity of a new novel approach in both legislation and judicial proceedings. Through these judicial decisions, India has made substantial progress in protecting the rights of domestic violence survivors, ensuring that the laws adapt to changing social norms and continue to provide justice and protection for all those victims coming under the protection of women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. So we conclude the very important issue of domestic violence, and we define as defined under sections 3 about physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, economic abuse as such, physical violence, verbal and emotional violence, sexual violence, and economic violence. So also we have discussed the very legal framework which governs the rights of women, those who are married, even those who are in live-in relationship. So, in that connection, we have discussed, besides the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act of 2005, we discussed the provisions under Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code and also the provisions relating to the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961. And to solve this very problem of domestic violence, we discuss some of the important leading cases whose judgments were delivered by the Honorable Supreme Court. So finally, we found the very impact of those decisions by the judiciary by evolving a response to the very pervasive social issue relating to domestic violence. So also we made a conclusion relating to domestic violence.